He grabbed her wrist and pulled her back. "What are you doing?" Andrew saw the mark of a green spiral on her wrist. "I thought so." He knew she was the last Nova. He cuffed her to his wrist and dragged her along. "You thought what exactly?" He forced her out of the school. Ava was pulling from him. "You are a Nova, aren't you?" Ava shook her head confused. "What is that?" He glared at her. "Don't play dumb." Andrew was too strong for Ava, and he forced her down the path. "I don't know what you're talking about. What is going on?" Andrew aimed his sword at her. She glared at him. "You don't have the right to ask me questions. Now are you going to come quietly, or am I going to have to slaughter the village?" She sighed as she went calmly with him. "Geez, this is exactly why I don't talk to strangers." Andrew laughed. "Then keep your mouth shut," he snarled. Andrew brought her past the village as everyone cried over her. "You guys, what's going on?" The villagers all shook their heads and remained silent. Kendra hugged Ava, but Andrew pulled her away from her mom. "Please don't take her!" Andrew pushed Ava into the helicopter and they took off. Ava started to sob. Andrew felt bad, so he tried to take the blame off of himself for the situation at hand. "Look, the core company wants you, not me." Ava still had no clue as to why she was being taken away. "I didn't do anything to you, just let me go." Andrew shook his head as Red stared at Ava in awe. Her appeal was that of her mother's, which was almost powerful enough to grant her an escape. "I'm sorry, but I'm not the one you need to convince. I'm just the delivery boy." Ava lowered her head in a panic. "Can you at least answer my question, then?" Andrew nodded his head. Ava looked directly into Andrew's eyes with all seriousness. "You called me a Nova. What is that?" Andrew rolled his eyes. "Stop playing dumb. It's not going to save you." Ava glanced out the window. "Fine, don't tell me. Just kill me for a crime I didn't commit." Andrew realized she wasn't faking. He looked at her bewildered. "You really don't know?" Ava shook her drooped and saddened head. A Nova is pure energy that can be used for upgrades in technology. The Novas are killed for our benefit. We've run out of energy, that is, until we found you. Ava looked to her hands. She realized her powers weren't a random thing. Her origins ran deeper than she could ever imagine. She at least had some closure of what she was. "So, you killed off the entire Nova generation for profit?" Andrew nodded his head. Ava looked sick to her stomach. "How could you do that?" Andrew tried to keep his strength without cracking under guilt. "You're not considered human." Ava clutched her fists. "Does that even make sense to you? So anything other than human is less. What kind of logic is that? Anything that lives, lives for a reason. It is of no one's right to say one is better than the other," she snarled. Andrew's eyes grew intrigued at her knowledge. "You humans are demented and disgusting. I'm glad I just found out I'm not a part of your race any longer." Andrew leaned back and stroked the vein popping from his forehead. "The humans need the energy to advance and survive." Ava gave a cruel gaze. She wanted to strangle the boy sitting beside her. "No matter what you say or do, you'll never justify what you humans have done. You wiped out an entire race." Andrew yanked his arm to himself, pulling Ava's chained arm closer to him. He then pointed to the green spiral on her wrist. "They're not wiped out yet." Ava knew she was the last link to the ancient bloodline of the Novas. She pulled her arm away from him angrily. "Great, so I'm the last. So you'll kill me for a few bucks, then what? You won't be getting any more energy if I die since I'm the last." Ava sniffled from her sobs earlier. "Who said anything about killing you?" Andrew couldn't look at Ava as she spoke. Ava gave Andrew a death glare, though he wouldn't see it. "Then what do you want?" Andrew kept his gaze out the window as he tensed up. "I shouldn't tell you this. I'll let the scientists tell you." Ava bit her lip aggressively. "No, please continue," she said sarcastically. Andrew sighed as Ava continued. "You owe me that much." Red was even wiping a single tear from his eye. There were still some humans that had hearts, though most of it was still cut in half, and some in quarters. Andrew cringed. He glanced to the floor of the helicopter as he grew ashamed of the world he had known and become in a disgusting way attached to. "Ava, with you, we can create more species of your kind. We're going to use you to repopulate the earth with Novas." Ava grinded her teeth. Andrew held his breath because he knew Ava would be furious. "Repopulate so you can farm us and kill us, and the same cycle will just continue? That's your brilliant plan?" Red intervened. Maybe we can do it in a civil way. Ava huffed heavily. Civil. That's what you call it. You humans should have been wiped out, not my people. Andrew stared at the wrath in Ava's eyes. Red interrupted again. How do you even know what your people were like? What if they were worse than us? Ava pointed to herself gently. Do I come across as someone who deserves death? She whispered. No, Andrew said. Then my people didn't deserve death either, and you know it. Red finally reached his destination, and Ava swallowed the nervous lump in her throat. Andrew held out his hand for her out of respect to help her out of the helicopter. She shunned his hand and helped herself out. Andrew led her to headquarters only to find a trail of blood. They both witnessed the secretaries, scientists, and civilians dead on the floor and at their stations covered in blood. They looked to be stab wounds right in the back. Ava hated the very breath of Andrew and everyone in that room, but she was still startled at the gruesome sight of blood. She latched onto Andrew's arm in a startled moment. Andrew drew back nervous, but he still held her close. He wanted to lead her down the hall to follow the trail of blood. Please don't take me down there, she whispered. He pulled her along anyway because, frankly, he didn't want to go alone. They followed the trail of blood into the elevator until they made it to the boss's office. Shroud was lying head down on his desk with blood all over. Ava watched the room, spooked, eyeing every corner, waiting for something to pop out. Andrew noticed a bloody envelope. He opened it up and began to read it. Andrew, I know you've come back to see what a mess I have made. I am ashamed of what I have done. The blood on my hands will never wash off. Not just from the blood of the company, but the blood belonging to the Novas that I have so cruelly helped kill to gain this sick company its benefits. I had no choice but to get rid of the leeches of this company. I have better plans for the girl and for this world. I know you found her. Everyone is after my head, so I can't return there. You'll have to come find me. Andrew, you know the usual spot. Bring the girl. Signed, Trickster. Andrew drew back in fear as to what his brother was capable of. Ava sensed something was wrong with Andrew, other than the distress from the trails of blood. She looked to the letter. Who's Trickster? Andrew's distraught features calmed. My brother. Ava's eyebrows raised in concern. Andrew grabbed Ava's hand even though it was still chained to his wrist, and he led her out of the building. He pulled her into the helicopter that was still waiting for them. What's going on? Red asked. Andrew couldn't tell him about the incident without getting blamed or blaming his brother. Andrew let go of Ava's hand as they buckled themselves in. Nothing. We have to go to Tina's house again. Ava looked at Andrew puzzled, but he put his finger up to his lips so she'd know to keep silent on the matter. Then an annoying beeping sound came from the helicopter's monitor. Red then started to turn up his radio signal. Red, can you hear me? Red, we've been attacked by one of our own soldiers. Shroud is dead, along with many of the company's employees. Send for backup. I repeat, send backup. Red turned around and sighed. Andrew threw his head back as his cover over his brother was blown. Andrew, tell me you didn't. Andrew shook his head. I didn't. Red glared at him in disbelief, and he tried to pull the lever back. I'm turning this baby around. Andrew drew his sword and pointed it to the back of Red's neck. Red froze as Andrew snarled, Keep flying or else. Don't think I won't do it. Red's eyes twitched from the fear Andrew instilled into his bones. Whatever you say, Andrew. Andrew withdrew his sword. Ava closed her eyes, waiting for this nightmare of hers to end. As they reached Tina's house, Red flew off to call for backup. Andrew knocked frantically on Tina's door. She opened it with annoyed eyes. Geez, Andrew, I know you miss me, but you don't have to beat my door down. Tina drew backward as Andrew pushed her forward. He was breathing heavily. What's wrong, Andrew? He turned his head over his shoulder so Tina followed his gaze. Tina noticed the girl behind him. Andrew pulled Ava by their chained wrists so she'd come into Tina's view. This is the Nova that I captured. Tina grabbed Ava's wrist. Tina's eyes then grew wide. So why didn't you take her to headquarters? Ava looked around to Tina's dark house. She had several weapons and armor along the wall. She had medals, trophies, and portraits of her in armor, but Ava didn't realize it was for the many Novas that she's helped to capture and kill. It was just a game to the soldiers of who could hunt down the most Novas fastest. Andrew glanced to the floor. I did take her to the company, but there was blood everywhere. Everyone was dead. Shroud is dead. Trickster killed them all. Tina pulled back from Andrew with a dropped jaw. Andrew looked like he wanted to cry from his worry, so Tina walked back to him and hugged him. I'm so sorry, Andrew. I don't even know what to say to you. How could this happen? She then stood on her tippy toes to kiss Andrew. Ava was still attached to Andrew's wrist, so she turned away shy and annoyed that she had to be that close to them both while they kissed. Tina smiled seductively. I can make you feel better. Tina grabbed Andrew's hand and she tried to pull him along, but then Ava was dragged along as well. She looked to Ava. Why don't you take off her cuffs so we can be alone? Andrew looked to Ava's wrist and then back to Tina with a smirk. He wanted to, but it was a wrist. But then she could escape. Tina ran to her cabinet to grab something and she suddenly stuck a needle in Ava's unaware arm. Ava began to black out, so Andrew caught her. The needle was filled with the serum that was used to put the Novas to sleep, making an easier capture. Tina threw the needle away as she laughed. There, put her on the couch and come in my room. She'll be asleep for 3 hours. Andrew placed Ava on the couch. Tina went in her room while Andrew took out the keys. He took the tight chains off of her wrist and then off of his. He rubbed his red and agitated wrist, for it was throbbing. Andrew then pushed Ava's long veins out of her face, and he stared for an unusually long time at her soft lips. Andrew then stood and entered into Tina's room. She waited under the covers. She held out her hand for him. Andrew grabbed her hand and went under the covers with her. Tina tried to rip off his Protocol Corps company uniform, and Andrew suddenly lost his smirk. As Tina kissed him several times on the lips, he suddenly pulled back. He grabbed her wrist to stop her. What are you doing? Tina got off of him. He looked at the ceiling and sighed gruesomely because this was the girl he's been dreaming of, and he couldn't understand what was making him stop. He wanted to ravish the girl of his dreams, and yet his conscience was supremely affected. Tina, you don't even know me. Tina glared at him. She suddenly grew even more attracted to Andrew's control. Okay, well, we'll have plenty of time to get to know each other. She cuddled up next to him as he wrapped his arms around her. They rested for the night until Tina's timer went off. She woke up with Andrew still in the middle of the night. The alarm was set so one of them would take the night shift of watching the prisoner. Tina wanted to lighten the mood with a too-soon joke. You know what? I am so glad I decided not to go into work today. She even giggled. Andrew faked a smile at her insensitivity to his situation. Oh, come on, Andrew. It was a joke. We can make a battle plan. Andrew sat up with confused eyes. Against my brother? Tina smiled sincerely, like Andrew's problems weren't her own. She sat up along with Andrew. Well, he made the mistake, not you. Andrew ran his fingers through his hair as the blanket slid down his bare and chiseled chest. Yeah, but he's still my flesh and blood. If he's in hot water, then so am I. Tina kissed Andrew on the cheek. She tried to kiss his neck as she said, Well, I can keep making you feel good if you want. She tried to keep going, but Andrew grabbed her wrist and stopped her. Actually, I think I want to be alone. Just for a little while. Tina nodded her head. All right. Later, then. She pulled the covers off of her as she stood. She walked out as her blue nightgown swayed with her walk. Andrew's eyes were glued to the ceiling as she left. He turned to the side and curled up in a ball under the covers to sob. Andrew then heard a knock on the door. Andrew didn't answer, but the door opened anyway. Ava walked in and she closed the door behind her. Andrew thought it was Tina, so he didn't turn around. Are you crying? Well, that's a stupid question. I heard you. Andrew's eyes then grew wide, but he stayed still as she sat on his bed. I just wanted to see if you were okay. Ava kept her back to him. Andrew wanted to turn around, but he guarded his heart against the prisoner. Why should you care? Ava was a prisoner, and yet she still became the bigger person and put others' happiness above her own. I may not be human, but I feel like one, and I feel for you. Andrew wiped some of his tears away. Ava breathed steadily, trying to be of some comfort to him. If anyone out there in the world hurts, then I do too. Andrew appreciated Ava going out of her way to make him feel better, even when he was her captor. Well, I feel sorry for you. You're too nice, and you have to be cruel to survive. Andrew smirked. Ava shook her head in disbelief of such an ignorant comment. Well, I feel sorry for you because you've never met anyone who puts themselves in other people's shoes. You're obviously not used to seeing it. Once you're done with this tough guy act and you need someone to talk to, let me know. Ava stood. Andrew crushed his eyebrows together, bewildered by her twist of a feisty nature. Everything will be all right, as long as you believe that. Ava turned to leave as Andrew finally turned around and sat up. He watched her leave until she closed the door behind her. Ava walked out to see Tina waiting for her. She punched Ava right in the stomach instantly, and she blacked out again. Tina carried her to the door. She placed her to the floor and chained her arm to the handle of the door so in case she woke up again, she wouldn't be able to leave.